wealth is not sexy. And it's not the big truck with big wheels. It's not the big boat. It's not the big motorhome. Those are debt vehicles that will drag you down. Wealth is those small chips away every single month of putting money away. I talk to clients today and they say, well, I made some mistakes. I'm never going to get there. And my point to them is if we have that mindset, we're never going to get there. We are truly never going to get there. It's never too late to open up the hood and take a look at where you're at.
Hey, Colorado investors, we have another special episode of our Fire on Fire investing. We're going to talk about preparing for your retirement as a firefighter. Now, this is an episode we do about once a month with Paul DeSalvo, who's a retired firefighter and has a passion for real estate investing in general, but also helping firefighters be prepared for a retirement and also the unexpected retirement. So Paul, glad to have you on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having us back, Chris. I'm really excited about this podcast today. It's going to be great. Fire and Fire was created when I got injured and I was looking for some fulfillment, something meaningful to do. I had lost my position as the Secretary Treasurer on the union, which was very meaningful to me. And Jon also served as well, and Jamin. And so I was in search of something fun to do and something meaningful and something that would help firefighters in the future. So that's basically why we're all here. And I'm really excited about this episode with Jon.
And I think your wife also kind of kicked you out of the house too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. She's pretty sick of me. So yeah, she said, come up with something or I'm leaving. So.
All right. So who's your co-host today?
This is Jamin Cook. Jamin Cook, I saw his passion for real estate. He got his real estate license after talking to me a whole bunch and wanted to know a little bit about the industry and, the ins and outs of it. And so he got his license. And then I saw his drive and passion for the same thing I was doing and looking for something meaningful to do. And Jamin was an obvious choice. So yeah, so he's partnering together with me.
Cool. Well, glad to have you back on the show, Jamin.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Now, you guys brought a special guest on here who's also a fellow retired firefighter, but also has made a transition to financial planning.
Yeah, so today we brought on Jon Adams, or Chief Adams, retired firefighter, rose through the ranks through at South Metro up to operations chief, was also the union president, and has now transitioned from the fire department into financial advising, specializing in firefighter retirements. And whether you're ready to retire in the next couple of years or you're looking 20 years down the line, Jon's a guy to come talk to.
Well, glad you're on the show, Jon. I'm excited to dig in and also have some fun debates about stock market investing techniques and also how we balance stocks, bonds, real estate, and all the other really cool asset classes out there. But start off and kind of give a little bit about your background and why and how you transitioned into financial planning.
Yeah, well, first off, thanks for having me on the show. I started the fire department in 1996. I was delivered toilet paper to the fire stations. And so my first day in the firehouse, I got yelled at a little bit because the toilet paper wasn't 2-ply. So effectively, my name through my career was known as 2-ply. But I started there and I transitioned into the fire academy in 1997. And just had a great opportunity once I started in the fire department to go through many different aspects. I was a firefighter, paramedic, and then worked my way up through the ranks. But more importantly, I always had a passion for our fellow firefighters. And like Paul said, on the union executive board with Jamin and Paul, we're able to serve, take care of benefits, pay, negotiate working conditions, all those things. And it was really at that point, I had a keen interest in finances and how do we make sure our firefighters retire not only healthy, but financially stable as well. In about the summer of 2003, I decided it was time to find something else to do. So I retired from the fire department. And similar to Paul, my wife said to me, hey, I'm not sure what you're doing the rest of your life, but it's not going to be sitting on the back patio. I had some close friends of mine who actually did the pension at South Metro in the early 2000s, who are my business partners today. And we had some long conversations and they asked me if I'd like to come on board their team. And so I went back to school, got my federal licenses that I needed, my Series 65, my life and health insurance license. And I've been working with clients now since November. As Jamin said, I primarily focus on firefighters that are not only in the job today, maybe looking at transitioning to retirement, or those that are in retirement, to make sure that they have the tools that they need. I think sometimes when we talk about finance, it can be scary for some people. So we really try to strip back all the unknowns and just paint the picture of what it looks like for retirement. So I'm excited to be here today, and thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I think a side note though is at South Metro we have a money purchase program, and then we've merged multiple departments that are in the state pension, the FPPA. So you're well versed in all of those. So if anybody's got questions about that,
Yeah, we can work with both. There's always the big debate in the fire service, which one's better. I equate it to ice cream. Every flavor of ice cream is really good. They just have different vehicles to get you where you need to be. So excited to dive into those topics today and talk about those.
Yeah, I mean, so Paul, where do you want to start? Because I know we got a lot of questions on here, and you're always about like, hey, you want everyone and also firefighters to invest, and also, unfortunately, a lot of times you guys get early retirements, like you had a couple years ago.
Right.
Where do we start throwing questions at Jon with?
The big thing for, recognizing early on how important your retirement is, and anything can happen on this job. So the big thing is, we're so excited when we get on the job, we're not even thinking about what benefits we have. And, a big thing is we don't get Social Security, and we also retire very early. Just normally, even if you're not injured, there's a gap you have to fill from that time you retire until Medicare. You can't be a 60-year-old firefighter unless you go upstairs like Jon did, then you can work up there till you're 80. So, but yeah, he was a firefighter, and he understood it, and he was a smart guy. He understood finance, so he's in a perfect position right now. And the big thing right now is, Jon, is what can you pass along to these guys that come on the department to help them get focused on what is it that will entice them to get involved in investing early? And how do we get the guys to start thinking about their investment in their 457s, maximizing that as soon as they can? What is the best way to start doing that, and how early should they start doing that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think, there's a saying that I was told when I was young at the fire service. I had the opportunity to work for an amazing chief, and he said every night he did three things. He looked at his financial picture to see what he was doing. He looked at his mental health to see how he was doing, and his physical health. He had a quote that I loved, and it was, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. Yep. The second best time's today. And so oftentimes, I talk to clients today and they say, well, I made some mistakes. I'm never going to get there. And my point to them is, if we have that mindset, we're never going to get there. We are truly never going to get there. So to your question, I think the best advice I could give to a young firefighter is do everything you can to put as much away as possible now when you're starting. We know that when you get the raise, we oftentimes have lifestyle creep, and we just take that 5% raise and we spend 5% more in our budget. But if we can be diligent about breaking some of that money out and contributing to all the different vehicles your department might have, it sets you up for a great chance in life to retire early, or if unfortunately you get injured, to be able to be successful with your family and have the funds that you need. I say that wealth is not sexy, and it's not the big truck with big wheels. It's not the big boat. It's not the big motorhome. Those are debt vehicles that will drag you down. Wealth is those small chips away every single month of putting money away. I mean, I remember when we first had kids, my wife and I, and Mac was a baby, and we were putting $25 a month into her college fund. And it wasn't a lot at the time. And I sure knew that $25 a month wasn't going to pay for college. But I knew that every time we did that, it was less money she had to save, because the last thing I wanted to do was have her come out of college saddled with debt, like we're seeing a lot of kids today. So you've got to get involved with whether it's your union or your station officer, your human resources department, and figure out what opportunities do you have. There are so many vehicles to save today to set you up for success. Now, for someone who's in the middle of their career, you just keep going. You just keep putting money away. You just keep working at that, taking a look at where you're at and where do you want to be. The other thing I see a lot is that, the tenure employee that maybe looks at their pension and they have, let's say they have $150,000 in their pension, and they say, well, I'm never going to make it because I've been on 10 years. I only have 150. So in 30 years, I'm only going to have 450, and there's just no way I'm going to make it. So there's kind of there's no sense in saving because I'm not going to make it. But the power of compounding interest is what changes all that. And really, if you're diligent about it and you spend a career in the fire service, there's no reason why you shouldn't have enough assets to survive in retirement.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think when I started noticing my retirement when I hit 100,000, and then the compounding of that 100,000 was phenomenal.
Yeah.
Then I started paying more attention to it. So, a lot of firefighters get their advice sitting around the kitchen table, right? And some good, some bad. And a lot of guys, I think some of the best advice I got was something that you had mentioned earlier, was when you get a raise, put that raise into your retirement. I mean, fill it up. If you can afford it, do it. Maybe even take half of it and invest that. That was some of the best advice I got. Now, I've seen some bad advice go around too. So these guys early on are really influential by the guys that have tenure, that have been on for a long time, start making recommendations to some guys. And I think it's really important that they start talking to somebody like you early on in their career and understand how they invest and move forward to grow that portfolio as quickly and, as fast as they can. Because like I said, anything can happen to you. So
yeah, you're exactly right. And no one, the roadmap we all have when we start the fire service is not the roadmap that we draw out once we're done with the fire service.
Right.
And we all have this picture when we start the academy that it's going to be a 40-year career. I was just having coffee this morning with a retiree, and he said, I thought I was going to work till I was mid 60s and I was going to retire and that was going to be life. And he didn't make it there. He's in his mid 40s and he decided to retire for a variety of reasons, but your bills don't understand you're retired. Your lifestyle doesn't understand that. And so you're exactly right. I think the more you can do up front, and there are some phenomenal assets around the firehouse table.
Yeah.
I will tell you though, I remember sitting around a firehouse table probably 10 years ago and they were convincing the guy at this table to go buy some options. And this kid had no idea, I think, what the stock market was, let alone an option. So I would just, to echo your point, there are some really good resources. I can think of a couple of guys right now at the department we retired from that are phenomenal in that regard. But when you're talking about your retirement or when you're talking about big life decisions, it's, you wouldn't get medical advice from someone sitting right across from you unless they're a really good paramedic. But you've got to take a look at, do we involve the expertise of a professional at this point to see where we're at?
Yeah, 100%. I'm sitting, I've sat at the table where I don't know if you remember Imelda Marcus shoes.
Oh yeah.
There was a big investment about people talking about, hey, they're searching for Imelda Marcus. She was her husband was a president of the Philippines and he got busted for all this criminal activity and they embezzled millions and she bought shoes. There was this investment group that came out saying, hey, we're searching for Imelda Marcus shoes. So give us $50,000 and, we're going to give you share the money with you. So it's advice like that. And that's where, my question is like, when should we really, should these guys, number one, start talking to a professional? At what point is a good time? Is it the first year? Is it the 5th year? Is it the 10th year? Or should it be like all through your career where you should be updating that portfolio?
Yeah, it's a great question. And each department should have a professional that's employed by the department to help them. So I would say in your first few years, it's conversations with your fellow firefighters of what options are out there to invest in, not what investments I should put in, but do I have a 457? Is there a health savings account I can put in? Can I put into my retirement health savings? So just understand the landscape of what's available to you. And then it's really a personal decision with your partner or in your budget to figure out how much can you put into those accounts each month. I would say the time to really start, in my opinion, to start thinking about when do we employ some professional help is probably about that 10-year mark where we've got 10 years in the job. We've got a little bit of money in our assets. Maybe we had some life changes. Maybe our spouse got a really good job and we have some extra money there, or maybe we had an inheritance, those types of things. But really that 10-year point is good because we know that we all want to work 25 to 30 years. But I can remember in my academy, we started in 1997. And today there was 10 of us. Today there's only 3 people left at the department. And that was 27 years ago.
Yeah.
So 7 of those employees didn't make it to the 25-year mark. Some didn't even make it to the 2-year mark. And so the more you can start thinking about it, because let's face it, the fire department benefits for the most part in Colorado, the ones I'm aware of, are phenomenal. You're probably not going to find that in the private sector with what you're able to put away. So early on in your career, understand what vehicles are available to you and fund those as much as you can. As you start progressing your career, maybe you get some promotions, maybe you have kids. I think that's the point where you start employing the service of an advisor, and it may just be a one-time check-in. Hey, here's what we have in our 401k. Here's our 457. What do you think? As an advisor, we model out performance for our clients and what retirement might look like. It's really hard to model out performance for someone who's in their 30s because first off, we don't know what life changes they're going to have. We don't know, are they going to get a promotion? Are they not going to get a promotion? Is it 3% raises every year? The picture for retirement for us from an advisor standpoint becomes much clearer the closer someone is to retirement, because about that 5-year mark away from retirement, when maybe they're entering the drop, we have a really good idea what their pay is going to be. They're probably not going to promote anymore. We have a really good idea of how much they have, what their expenses are. And so we're able to fine tune it. But it doesn't mean at that 10-year mark, you shouldn't be reaching out to someone. I think the other thing that's the two other things I would encourage firefighters at any level is you got to have an estate plan. We see so many people that don't have a will or a trust. Yes. And speaking from personal experience, on my wife's side of the house, we had something happen in her family where there wasn't an estate plan. And it was well into the six figures to get this figured out. And so I'm not saying that happens to everybody, but it's a cautionary tale that, you can do a will or a trust for relatively cheap. In fact, for our clients, it's included as a part of our services to them as we work with them on a will or a trust or both. But you need to have some direction as to where you want your assets to go should something bad happen to you. And that includes a financial power of attorney, a medical durable power of attorney, all of those things. So that's number one, most important. Number two is life insurance. Life insurance is a vehicle that covers us for a finite period of time, primarily when we're in our earning years and we're not self-insured, meaning we don't have enough assets to be able to, if something were to happen to us, to cover our bills. I'm not a fan of whole life insurance. I'm a fan of term life insurance for the period of time you need. It's relatively inexpensive. It gets us through. But I have a lot of firefighters that just think about themselves. And I'll tell you right now, if you're married or if you're in a relationship with someone, if something happened to your partner, you got to think about that too. Because I knew when I was in the job, if something happened to my wife, I would have left the department to take care of my kids. And I've lost that income. So life insurance on both providers in the household is key. And I would advise firefighters to shop your life insurance. There are a lot of people that will come to you, to the stations that say, hey, we're here for firefighters. Here's the life insurance we can give you. Life insurance is really cheap. I mean, you can get $1 million policies. You're talking, depending on age, but you're talking $25, $35, $40 a month, as opposed to some numbers I've seen. We have clients that were paying $80 a month for a life insurance policy that's just over the top. So two big things: estate planning, life insurance at any age. And then as we start navigating into the older ages, I think that's when you really start taking a hard look at what retirement means for you.
Right. Could you talk a little bit more about just term versus whole? Because I agree with you about life insurance. And I feel like a lot of people get very confused about between the two. And there's also lots of various salespeople who sell whole life insurance, which has much bigger commissions than term life insurance.
Yep.
And I think there's a lot of confusion around that.
Yeah, it's a great question. And you're exactly right. I think we agree on the purpose of life insurance. There's two different products. Term life insurance is set for a period of time. So typically they're 20-year policies or 30-year policies that are the most normal that you'll find. You can get them for any denomination. For the most part, we provide. So I'm licensed to sell life insurance. It's not a huge part of our business, but for clients there may be a window where we need to have life insurance. So typically we'll look, let's just say a 20-year, $1 million policy. And what that means is from the day you start, the policy is in effect for 20 years. And if during that 20-year time you die, the insurance company will pay your beneficiaries $1 million. Now that's not inflated. That doesn't go up for inflation. It's $1 million. So you have to understand that you have a little bit of inflation pressure, that $1 million today is not the same as $1 million in 19 years. But typically what we say is life insurance should go and probably till you're in your early to mid 50s, because at that point in life, you probably have enough assets that if something happen to you, your kids, if you're married with kids or you're in a relationship with kids, your kids are probably out of the house. Your bills should be covered. And so your pension, your savings really acts as your life insurance. So we're just looking to bridge this gap from when I don't have a lot as I'm building through my life. And if something were to happen, how do I take care of my loved ones? That's term insurance. And it becomes more expensive the later you get it in life, because the insurance company is just looking at actuarial tables. What are the odds of you dying in this period? The cheapest policy, and this would be the best thing I think for any young firefighter, you get in at 22, 23 years old, grab a 30-year policy that's $1 million policy. You're probably going to pay $16 a month for that whole term. That price never goes up, and you're covered into your 50s. So the second part of life insurance is whole life insurance. And you're exactly right. The commissions on a whole life insurance policy are exponentially higher than a term policy. I think when we sell a term policy, the commission may be $12 or $15. You're not going to make a living selling term life insurance. Whole life insurance is different. You get a commission, a trailing commission every single year that policy is in effect is one of the options you can take. Now, the sales pitch on whole life is you have insurance for your whole life, and it builds up a cash value that at any point you can access and use in retirement. So it's sold kind of as the best of both worlds. You've got protection during your years, and then if you don't use it, hopefully you don't use it, there's some cash value. Because that's one of the downsides to term is if at the end of 20 years, I haven't died or I haven't exercised the policy, but I don't get anything. So that money,
but you're still alive.
You're still alive, which is a great thing. And that money's gone. And so that's one thing that whole life talks about is it's every month you're writing a check that may be wasted. I don't necessarily agree with that because the difference in premiums for a whole life policy is exponential. I mean, it's probably 3 to 4 times what you're looking at on a whole life policy. And really the cash value at the end is not worth it. You'd be better off, in my opinion, as an advisor to buy a term policy for the term of time you need it and take that extra money and put it in a 40 or in your 457 or put it in a HSA account or a 529 account. So those are just high level brief difference between the two.
No, that's great. Thank you. And I agree about like buy term and then invest the difference between like the whole life policy. I did 10 years ago, I did a bunch of research on there, and all the modeling I did came to the exact same conclusion you suggested, where it's, hey, just if you buy the term, the cheapest and the best, and hopefully you're still alive at the end of 20 years, and invest the difference in the stock market, and you're better off.
Yeah. And there are some, I will say some clients that we work with, there is a place for different life insurance policies for estate planning, et cetera. But for majority of the clients I deal with, we just really look at a term policy to cover a period of time where they're at their most risk.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought, go ahead.
I guess I'd like to go back to when a firefighter should come talk to you. And I think there's a scary reality, and it's kind of a personal story that my wife was hanging out with some firefighter wives that we all went to academy together. And she came home and thought I was hiding money from her. And I was like, what are you talking about? And so I opened up my account, and our pay difference every 2 weeks was almost $1,200. And I opened up my account and I showed her that I was hoarding money into because I had to catch up. I started late at South Metro in a different retirement system. I was hoarding money away, trying to catch up and get that compounded interest over time as fast as I could. And what I told her was these other firefighters, they weren't contributing anything. And so I think that if there's that question of, and obviously with the economy and stuff like that, people are like, well, I need as much money in my check as I can get. I think meeting with someone like you early on and getting set on the right path, even if it's a small amount every month, is important.
Yeah, I would agree with you 100%. And to your point, one of the things we've been taught forever, I think, growing up, and you guys can interject if you disagree, is we don't talk about politics or religion and finances.
No,
and I'm not here to talk about politics or religion, but I do. I actually just had this conversation with my wife the other night. I think it's a tragedy, if you will, in our society that my son has to take a geometry class that I don't think he'll ever use in the real world. But we're not mandated to take a personal finance class, which from day one, you can really submarine your whole life. If at 20 years old, you go max out a credit card and go crazy. And I'm not saying everyone's doing that, but my point is that to what you were saying is we don't talk about money. We don't have these conversations. And so I worked with a firefighter a long time ago, a friend of mine who transferred down to Phoenix Fire. And he said, I'm not looking at my pension statement till I'm 30 years on the job, because why do I care today? And my point is, how do you know performance of your funds? What are you paying in fees, which are another big thing? We can dive down that rabbit hole. But if I'm not staying on top of my financial health, that'd be akin to saying, I'm not going to work out for the next 30 years because I'll just wait till I'm older in life. Like, again, going back to what I talked about, the chief officer that I was really good friends with, every night it was just something, just a check-in. And you're right. It's a lot of times it's not massive inflows of money into people's account. It's a commitment that every single month I'm going to put X amount of dollars in, which is what I can afford, and we're going to invest it. And over the long haul, I look today, the $25 I referenced earlier for my kids' college fund grew with different raises. We increased and increased and increased. But today there's enough in there that will cover the kids' college, which for me was something I grew up. The other reason I'm passionate about finance and making sure a financial picture is because my family is not a really good my parents are not a good example of the financial stewards. We didn't talk about it. The 80s were a rough time, I think, for a lot of people with interest rates as high as they were. We just didn't discuss it. And then you look and there's financial issues. I remember as a kid going to get money for lunch, and I looked in my mom's checking book and we're negative in a checking account. And I'm thinking, if you have one thing today, if you have a medical incident, if something happens to your house, how are you going to afford that? And in the 80s, interest rates as high as they were, you could just crater your future. So I share that. I think people just need to have the conversations. Like we need and have the conversations with people that understand what they're talking about. I love the firehouse conversations. Yeah. The fire table conversations are phenomenal. And like I said, everyone knows that their department, someone they could seek out to ask about what's available. When we start getting into more money and funds, that type of thing, I think it's time to find whatever advisor speaks to you or you have a relationship with, or you feel like you can work with, and sit down and just get a checkup.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I want to go back to what you said earlier was about wills and trusts and life insurance. That's something I never thought about when I was at the firehouse. That's not stuff we talked about. It was boats, trucks, vacations, Imelda's Marco shoes, or
I got to get into this fun.
Those are much.
Did you invest in that, Paul?
No, I did not.
I
found it entertaining to hear about the people that did. But anyways, going back to that, I wish we would have had more of those conversations, because I look back and go, the job that we're in is not only dangerous, but it's high risk with cancers, heart disease. Firefighters are, 3 times? It's probably even more than that, likely to have a heart attack than the general population, because lack of sleep, the cortisol injections we get from the alarms. So it's well documented that we suffer from physical injury and internal injury on this job, significantly higher than the rest of the population. So I really like that, get the conversation started. That's what, this thing is all about. Fire on Fire is, let's start talking about stuff that's meaningful to yourself and your family. What's going to help you get over that fence when you run into a problem is like, hey, I protected myself, I'm good to go. And I wish I really would have known about that more. So people should really reach out and talk to you. Our audience out there, please reach out to Jon or one of us to, get you in contact with Jon. But yeah, anything more on the wills and trusts?
I'll share a story about life insurance. It was probably the most impactful for me on a lot of different levels. So I was the union president. We had an off-duty fatality of a firefighter who was snowmobiling in the mountains and unfortunately got caught in an avalanche. I went down to his family. He was married to his high school sweetheart at that time, twin 12-year-old kids. He's pretty much the provider for the family. And what started as a day snowmobiling is now ended in a death. And his wife looked at me and said, how are we ever going to make it? And I think they had a little bit of life insurance, but not enough to take that aspect off the table. Now, we're never going to replace the human that passed away, but can we take one bad thing off the table? Can we just assure that finances are taken care of? And that was really my passion for working in our foundation that we had and doing the golf tournament, because we were able to raise money, get an injection of funds right away. But we had another death a year after that off duty, and same thing. And I don't know if you've ever looked at the expense for a funeral today, but there's 2 things. Number 1, they're expensive. And number 2, they're not going to have your funeral unless you're paying that bill, because unfortunately there's someone right behind you that has to have a funeral that has that money. I remember driving down to the mortuary and writing a check from our foundation so the funeral could happen on that day. And those are 2 stories I share that are probably a little dramatic, but they're actual things that happen in my life that were impactful. Now you add in, Colorado as a state is a reasonable state when you have a community property state. So if I pass away in absence of will or trust, my assets go to my spouse. But now let's add in a scenario, because unfortunately we know that firefighters have a higher divorce rate. So let's add in a scenario where I'm divorced and I don't have a will or a trust, and something happens to me. And now we're trying to figure all this out about where the assets go. And I'll tell you what happens is you got to go to court. And if you've looked up the expense of a decent probate attorney, they're expensive. And you're going to spend a lot of money of your assets. Even if in my wife's situation I shared earlier, in her family, there was one person that was balking about what was going on, not even related to the family. And that caused it to have to go all the way to the Supreme Court of North Dakota. That's an expensive route to go down, because the will and trust wasn't what it needed to be. And so something simple as today, and some people say, well, a trust, in my opinion, was always for someone who had a lot of assets, or I don't need a trust. You might not. You might just need a will that clearly identifies what you have, where you want it to go. But you have to understand, if you don't have a will or a trust and you die, someone else will make the decisions of where your assets go.
Yeah, you don't want that to happen.
The other thing, back to your point, Paul, about life insurance that I always found interesting is, in our industry, we see bad things happen every day. And I think sometimes that spurs us to really enjoy life in the moment, because you never know when it's going to end. But it was interesting to me how for a lot of times, it didn't translate into the mindset of the wills, trust, and life insurance.
Right.
Like, oh, I went on this call and this happened to this person today. This could very easily happen to me. So I need to button this up.
Yeah.
I think for everyone out there, I want to stress, a will and trust is not expensive. For most people, you don't need to go sit down with an attorney in their office and spend thousands and thousands of dollars. There are a lot of resources out there today where you can get a legal will and trust for a non-complicated estate for probably under $1,000. And life insurance is relatively inexpensive as well if we're looking at just straight term policies. So 2 easy checkoffs that you could do that don't cost a lot of money that will save you a lot of money down the line potentially.
100%.
Set your family up for success.
Yeah. I mean, because if you can't be there to provide for your family, I know most departments have a small life insurance policy, but I was looking the other day, I think some departments it's, and I don't want to be critical when I say this, but it's around $50,000. Well, $50,000, half of that's going to pay for a funeral if you're off duty. So now we got $25,000 for the family to figure out. And then you're expecting the spouse. What about counseling if you have kids? How long does it take for them to go back to work because their whole world has changed? So like I said, it's a really cheap way to take just one major thing off the table and have that insurance. Look, we pay for auto insurance, home insurance, like there's no tomorrow, partially because we're mandated.
Right.
But life insurance is super cheap and something that you got to look at.
Yeah, this is something where 100% I wish I would have known early on to do this stuff and protect myself. I mean, I thought I was going to have a healthy career, retire normal, after 30 years, 27, 30 years, and, all of a sudden injury and life's changing. And fortunate for me, I had my real estate and invested early. And that's what I'm trying to encourage people to do, no matter what it is. It doesn't have to be real estate. It can be wills, trust. That's an investment in yourself. Anything to make yourself and put yourself into a position that protects yourself from future injuries or whatever it may be. You have to leave the job early for whatever reason. You got to change jobs. But yeah, that's all good advice. And I highly recommend you guys reach out and start getting that advice early.
And we've talked about stock investments and IRAs and kind of that realm with you, but you've also dabbled in real estate. And how has that played into your retirement or cash flowing or just your life in general?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So it's funny, I was working with a client the other day, and they were fortunate enough that they paid their loan on their home down pretty far. So they have a lot of equity in there. One of the hard things when we're financial planning for a client is you always have to have a place to live. And so sometimes I think people think about their primary residence has a fair amount of equity in it, and I can tap into that equity. And you can, there's different avenues today to tap into the equity in your home while you're still living there. But my point is that, let's say you have $500,000 equity in your primary residence. Well, you're always going to have a place to live. So that's calculated in your net worth, but is it really super accessible to you or not? So I feel like I missed the boat. I had the opportunity to work with a phenomenal human in the fire department for probably the first 6 years of my life. And he was heavily invested in real estate and rentals. And my wife and I were a little bit late to the game, but a few years ago, we purchased a rental property in South Carolina. And the nice thing, Jamin, about that property is it's kind of twofold for us. So we can use it as a spot where we want to go and just get away from the world and hang out and relax.
Yeah.
And at the same time, we have people that want to do the same thing that are paying the mortgage for us. And so for us, it was a great opportunity. And that doesn't even count the appreciation we've seen in that market. When we're modeling out for clients growth of assets, and you guys are the experts in real estate, so you may have a better idea, but we're modeling out about 4 to 6% growth in real estate assets on a yearly basis. Now you take a look at that, again, that house today, if I'm in a fixed term insurance or mortgage on that house, my rate's staying the same. My insurance is going to go up a little bit, right? But my principal payment and it's staying the same in interest. But the value of that house is going up exponentially. So I do see a lot of successful portfolios that have a portion of real estate that's not a primary residence in their portfolio, because a lot of times those cash flow. The other thing is, if it's not, and it's not your primary residence and you have equity, you can easily tap, well, not easily, but you can tap into that by either liquidating if you had to, worst case scenario, or doing different ways to get the money out of that asset. But it's a great question. It's something we always look at, because going back to it, what we talked about earlier about the 20-year mark, we have a lot of people that I hear say, well, it's so expensive to buy real estate today. And I always tell them, well, what does it look like in 10 years? It's going to be exponentially more expensive.
Yes.
So, I mean, I remember when we bought our first house, we were renting an apartment. I think it was $750 a month for rent. This was the late 90s. We buy our house and the mortgage was going to be like $950 or $1,000. And I thought, it was a condo. I was like, how are we going to do this? And we figured it out.
Yeah.
Because when we sold it 2 years later, that little bit of increase was nothing. And then we rolled it. You just roll it into a new house, and you roll it into a new house. And then you look back, you're like, wow, we did pretty good. So that's another thing I would say. Sure, it can be expensive to live in this area, but there are opportunities abound out there to find a place to get in, because I personally don't agree with, there's some people out there that say renting is the way to go because you don't have to worry about expenses if it breaks and blah, blah, blah. Well, I'll tell you that with our rental, if something breaks, I just increase the fees next year for people coming in. And I know landlords do that. Like they're in the business to make money. And so you're going to pay it. So I don't buy into some of the arguments out there that renting for life is better than owning property. I think owning property is one of the best things you can do, not only for your financial future. But when I left the department and was in a moment where it was like, I didn't know what life looked like, I knew that I had a few things. I had a pension and I had real estate, and we're covering our basic needs at that point. We can figure the rest of it out. So that answer your question?
Yeah. I think it just points to diversification within your portfolio, right? And it counts as an asset, and you look at that for retirement and long-term, and whether you retire here or you decide to retire somewhere else, right? And take that cash and be debt free. There's lots of options.
For sure. Yeah. And there's, and it's not only, I would tell young people today or younger people in the job, maybe Colorado's not the place for you to retire. Maybe it's somewhere else, and maybe you know that. Well, go get something today if you can swing it. Rent it out today to cash flow it to cover your expenses and your bills. And that may not be your forever home, but that may have built up enough equity so that when you decide to venture down to wherever that is in the United States, you can therefore liquidate that and buy something new. And that's one less thing you have to worry about. Again, it's no matter what vehicle we're looking at, in my opinion, it's starting today and making small inroads every single day at it. It's not, wealth generation is not overnight. It's a long process and a long path to get there. Now, let's face it, there's some people that overnight get it, right? And unfortunately on social media, that's what you see. You see the person, my son shares with me last night, I think this individual placed a $10 bet on 5 different things. And if the Yankees win the World Series, it's going to pay $500,000. And my son's like, we should do this, Dad. I thought, then if everyone did this, they wouldn't be in business to do that. There are so many people that didn't. But unfortunately, I share that because in our society, I think we highlight the overnight success because we kind of are a I need it now society. Yeah. That's not generating wealth. Generating wealth is a long slog. It's a long path.
And it's boring.
It is boring.
Yeah. And it's work.
It's work, it's boring, and sometimes it's denying yourself what you really want. I really want that boat today. I really want that motorcycle today.
Or that Dodge Ram.
It's a great, yeah. You want to talk about the Dodge Ram?
Yeah, talk about it.
So
I think it's important.
Wait, who had the Dodge Ram here?
It was me. Okay. So 1997, I start the fire department, and we didn't have much growing up. So I'd made it in life, right? I'm a firefighter. I'm making a decent paycheck. And I was putting money in my 457 because that's what a smart chief officer told me to do. And so I was following what he told me to do, put in my 457. Well, I see this green Dodge Ram that I have to have. Extended cab, beautiful, is when they just changed the body style on the front of 97. So Another coworker of mine who I'm good friends with today, came on the job at the same time, was contributing the same amount to his 457 because you can only put so much in per the federal guidelines. I stopped and I went to the accountant, Carl Peacock was his name at the time. And I said, hey, Carl, I'm going to stop contributing my 457 because I'm buying a Dodge Ram. And he's like, that's the dumbest thing you could ever do. and I'm thinking to myself, for anyone out there who knew Carl Peacock.
Yeah, but I feel so good.
Yeah. He had a Toyota truck that he converted in his garage to an extended cab. And I'm like, look, dude, you converted a car to an extended cab. I'm actually going to buy an extended cab. So I go buy this Dodge Ram and I don't contribute to my 457 because I'm paying the fee for the loan for the Dodge Ram. Well, I don't know where that Dodge Ram is today. In fact, I think it was in my garage for maybe 3 or 4 years, and I had to find the latest. That's my one vice's vehicle, so I had to go find the next thing, right? And it's just a perpetual cycle of losing money. But here's what I do know: when I compared, and I compared this for a recruit class when I was in training, when I compared my balance to my 457 and this individual's balance, and we came on the same time, and he kept contributing, he had over $100,000 more in his 457 than I had. And I just took a time out for 3.5 years in the late 90s and didn't contribute $300.
What did the Dodge Ram cost in the late 90s? 30,000?
Yeah, I want to say it was like mid 20s. I mean, my payment was like $370 a month for a 5-year loan. So pretty low, right? Because I don't think you could get a $370 payment today if you tried.
No, without putting a lot of money down.
Yeah, but that's my point. Like the instant gratification of I needed this Dodge Ram overshadowed the fact that if someone had told me that Dodge Ram was going to cost me $100,000, I wouldn't have. But we don't have those conversations because and for the firefighters out there, I love you. But what happens is we go in the firehouse and we see the brand new motorcycle, we see the brand new boat, or we see the brand new motorhome. And I think our younger generation coming in feels like, I need to get that. I need to get that.
Keeping up with the
I need
Joneses.
to get that. And all I'll say is that maybe you don't. Maybe you don't need to get it. Maybe you need to invest a little bit more. You know, the other thing I share this kind of funny story that we have a lot of firefighters that work second jobs. And I don't think it's so much anymore. It was a lot when we started. And these people are just working themselves in the ground. And I asked some guy one day, why are you working a second job? And he said, you just don't understand how expensive it is. But again, he had all these toys he was trying to pay for. So I asked him a question. I said, hey, if you had a buddy who worked 40 hours a week, let's say they worked in corporate America somewhere, and it's Friday night, you're at home and you order a pizza and your buddy shows up the door to deliver a pizza and he's working part-time for Domino's because he's trying to make ends meet, you'd have a conversation with him, right? You'd say, hey, you're making a fair amount of money. Why are you working at Domino's, right? But I think in the fire department, we have, there's a couple of things. We have time off, which allows us to work that second job or work overtime. But what I would ask is, are you working overtime to retire earlier? Or are you working overtime to support your lifestyle today that's maybe a little bit higher than your lifestyle should be today?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's probably the latter.
I would agree.
Yeah.
So reading a phenomenal book right now called Die with Zero. And if you get the chance to read it, again, I don't advocate that you die with zero because you can't predict that. We don't know when we're going to die. We don't know how much we have to spend. But what I would advocate is if you kind of peel that back and listen to what the author's telling you, the most succinct thing he says is, if you die and you leave your family a couple $1 million, how many hours of work did you take away from your family to make that, only to leave it to them when you died? And would they rather have appreciated the time you were with in life when you could be with them and not the money? So it's a really fascinating way, I think, of flipping our mindset a little bit, that there's a point in life where we can have worked till we're 60, 65 and have all this money. But do we have the capacity to enjoy that and live a great lifestyle? Or do we start when we're young and start putting as much away as we can so that when we transition in the 50s, maybe we start looking at it? And again, we know the job of a firefighter, whatever rank you're at in that job, is inherently dangerous, not only from a mental health perspective, but from a wellness perspective. And I always thought I was going to work till I was 60. I think I shared that earlier. But I'll say today, I believe the job of a firefighter is a young person's game.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Paul, you hit the nail on the head. You transition up to the office, you could probably eke out a little more
Right.
career. I would say it's a different toll. It's more of a mental toll
Yeah,
at that
absolutely.
point. But I would challenge all the firefighters listening today. What changes could you make today in your life to maybe set that retirement age at 55?
That's one thing I wanted to talk about was, I want to go back to the education and how we were brought up was, we were brought up not to take risks, right? And that the stock market isn't a place where you take risks at or anything. And I read a book and, it talked about why people don't invest is because they're afraid, the fear, and getting over that fear is the number one key to success. Is get uncomfortable. Fortune favors the bold is a great saying. Is that there's measured risk. Obviously, I don't want you, Imelda's Marcos, she was hard. That's a risk. So, investing in getting aggressive with your stocks, where there's a lot of guys that come on and believe that bonds are the way to go or something like that. And they still have 20 years left in their career and they play with they pull in and out of the stock market because they see something on the horizon that they're scared about. It's time in the market, not timing the market, as you said earlier.
Yep.
And that's something that you need to abide by and listen to and, talk to the guys that have been doing it for a while, that have the experience, and, talk to the guys. I always listen to the guys that had the biggest balances in their 457s and their 401ks. Those are the guys I listen to. And I was successful. I managed a lot of my stocks myself and learned about indexing. And, a lot of the 401ks don't offer those, but the 457s do, where you can manage your own money. So we have defined benefits, defined contributions. So everyone has kind of a different retirement out there that they need to fully understand and how to invest. Whether you're defined benefit or defined contribution, understand the ins and outs and what retirement looks like. And how important, because I thought I knew everything when I was retiring, and I talked to a lot of retirees that thought they knew everything. I'm learning something new every single day about taxes, retirement income, and how to manage it. Taxes being one of the biggest one.
How to play the game.
Yeah, I'll say lot to unpack there. So here's 2 guarantees I can make you. The market's going to go up and the market's going to go down. That's what I can make you. I can't tell you what the market's going to go up or what it's going to go down, but I can guarantee you it's going to. So back to your point of volatility, we've the last couple of years have been nice. I mean, I talk to clients on a daily basis that are like, wow, did you see how much I made last year? And you have to prep them with the fact of that's what we did last year, but there are some headwinds coming that we're going to go through in the market. Now, I don't think that should generate fear in anybody, because back to your point, there's really two things you can look at when you're investing in the market. We can do what's called timing the market, where I think something big is going to happen. Therefore, I put all my money in a basket and I go with it. And I'm at the point now where I think things are going to change. So I pull everything out and I sit on the sidelines. So that's timing the market. And I'll ask everybody out there, did you know that when COVID hit, the market was going to drop overnight about 35 to 40% within a 1 week time frame? Did you know that from, I think it was 2017 to 2019 was one of the biggest downturns we've seen in our time, and the market had dropped out about 30, depending on what you're in, about 30 to 40% sustained over that time frame? We have a generation of investors, I think, that have been in the market over the last couple of years where it's been pretty good, and you've seen regular returns, but we haven't seen an overarching loss, and we're going to have that. What I would encourage you to do is just weather through it, because I don't know the exact number, but there's an article out recently that talked about timing the market, and there were 7 days, straight up trading days, just 7 in like the last 80 years, that if you had missed out, your total portfolio would be down a massive amount of money.
Yeah.
And where we know, if I stay in the market, even when it's uncomfortable, and especially for firefighters that are making regular contributions to their 401, you're buying every 2 weeks into funds. So we're buying them high, we're buying them low, but we're dollar cost averaging out over the time frame. And if you just pull up the return on the stock market, we're not going to quote any numbers, but just look at the graph. From the left, it's low, and the right, it's high. And that just shows over time that the market eventually will come back and return, or historically, that's what we've seen. And so what I would challenge people is, you've got to find, and we do this, where I'm at today is we work intently with our clients to start with about what is their risk tolerance. And risk tolerance and need to take risk are two completely different things. And so let me explain that real quick. We have some clients that are super aggressive and they want to invest all their money and they want to make a big return. But understand, the more we open ourselves up to a big return, we also open ourselves up to a big loss because we're invested in things that potentially could provide a big return, but they could provide a big loss as well. So we have some clients that may have a tolerance for that, but the need is not there. You know, I've got a client today who's in his mid to late 60s who has more money than he'll need for his life. We could stop investing it today. We could give him a check every single month and he could live till he was 95. And at the rate he spends, he would never run out of money. We don't need to be aggressive with him. So he may want to be aggressive, but the need is super low. So why would we ever expose him to larger losses than he needs, right? And so that's one of the things I think it's important when you're working with whatever advisor you choose to work with is they have to understand you and they have to understand your personal financial situation. Do you have a need to take risk? And then are you willing to take the risk? And sometimes those don't align in the same spot we think they should. We know that if we just stay in the market, and again, here's the other thing. If I have an account worth $100,000 and I lose 50% and I pull out, I need 100% return to get back to that 100,000. Right. And so my point is we might see, you know, again, during that period of time, we had some pretty big drawdowns. We might see a 50% reduction over a couple year period. It would be awful hard to, if you pulled out once the market starts going back in and you pile in to find the few things that are going to get you 100% return.
Oh, I totally agree. And I'll add something on there and I can probably speak more vulgar than you can since you're a licensed professional. None of us here, and probably none of us listening to this podcast, are smarter and faster than the guys on Wall Street. They are very smart. They're literally rocket scientists, you know, for a lot of the traders now. Like people out there trying to time the market, I think you're an idiot for trying to do that because it's so hard to do. And yes, we hear about the 0.2% people that do it well. But the 99.8% people that do it, they underperform just leaving all the money in there. So I totally agree with it. And I want to be more straightforward that I think, myself included, I am not smarter than anyone on Wall Street.
Well, yeah, I would agree with you 100%. And your trading mechanisms are slower. So you can log into whatever your provider is that you want to do. If you think you're going to be a day trader, I'll tell you that the trades have already happened by the time you feel like it's time to pull off to get that.
Yes.
Right. And you can go on. Yeah. And you can go on.
Well, read Flash Boys. Have you read that book? That's an insanely interesting book on the timing of what they do.
Yeah. I mean, if you just jump on Reddit and you go to Wall Street Beats or any of those, there's always, like to your point, there's always a success story of, oh, I bought this option today and by this afternoon I made $100,000. And I'll tell you, no one's posting their losses.
Just like Vegas.
Again, if take anything you want to do in life, take anything you want to do that you want to be good at, or you want to find success in, it's not overnight. It takes time and it's weathering the storm. It's weathering the ups. It's weathering the down. Again, we try to find the pain point for our clients where it hurts. I'm not happy that I pulled up my account and I'm down X amount, but I know if I just stay in over the long haul, we're going to come back and we're going to be just fine. And so a long-winded answer back to your point of the fear, but there is a lot of fear. And there is, I think sometimes firefighters sell themselves short and they say, well, I'm just a blue collar employee or I'm just a firefighter. And I would ask you to change that a little bit. You do an amazing job at where you're at today and providing for your community and taking care of the needs of the community. If you feel like that when it comes to investments, find someone that you rely on, that you trust, that can help you walk that path. You don't need to be the jack of all trades in finance. You do when you go on a call. Like Mrs. Jones calls you to her house and it could be a plumbing issue. It could be, and we've all been there on public assist where you think to yourself, why is she calling the fire department? Well, she's calling the fire department because she has no one else to call. And you should be honored that she's calling you because of that. But you don't have to be everything in this world to everybody, right? You can rely on other people to help you out. And that's really my passion when I take a look at kind of why did I get into this? And I didn't, on my map we talked about earlier, I didn't draw this out. This was nowhere near on the map. In fact, if you would hand me a map that said this is the way it would be, I would have probably laughed at you. But it's the greatest thing that ever happened to me because I'm super passionate about taking care of our first responders and taking care of our firefighters and police officers and what that looks like in retirement.
Yeah, but even before you retired from the fire department, you were the go-to. Everybody always said, go talk to Jon Adams.
I made some mistakes. There were some single stocks I purchased that were
There's always mistakes, right?
But you make a great point that, we are prideful people and we don't ask for help. Even when it's worse, when we get sick, right? Yeah. We don't ask for help. And especially in finances, I think that carries over the same way. Is we're very prideful. We don't want to ask for help. We all think we know what we're doing when we don't at all. Like I said, I've done a lot of stuff and a lot of investing. I'm learning something new every single day and stuff I wish I would have done a lot earlier.
Yeah.
So,
and it's never too late to open up the hood and take a look at where you're at.
Right.
I mean, even someone that's a couple years out from retirement, you can make some minor modifications. Now if you're a couple years out from retirement and we're running numbers and there's been a lot of things you've done that we don't have the assets we need to get to retirement, you may have to work past when you really want to work. But for most people we see, they're in a really good spot. In fact, most clients I meet with that are firefighters today that are thinking about retirement, when they come in and we run the numbers, they actually have this impetus to retire sooner.
Yeah.
Because they've made it. It's just they didn't feel like they've made it. We work our whole lives at pretty good pay.
Yeah.
But never in our minds do we think, I'm going to be able to retire at 55. And I'll tell you, if you start young and you contribute early and often, it's a very doable path.
Yeah, there's a lot I want to dive into here. Obviously, our time, I
think there'll be a part two here.
But yeah, I think that's why I really wanted, Jon to come in. I'm really excited about this. And I'm excited for people to listen to this, to start getting involved, because I think the next series is we dive in a little bit deeper about these investments, whether it be in stocks or real estate or whatever, is how to mitigate your risk, how to teach people that there is a way to mitigate a lot of that and not be afraid, is surround yourself with people smarter than you. And that's what I did. And, I appreciate everything you're doing. I think it's great how you're helping the firefighters. It's exactly what Jamin and I are trying to do, is get people focused more on preserving their retirement, making sure they have a healthy retirement, and being prepared for the worst is the biggest thing. I wish I had that, and I want to pass that along. So.
And the changing fire department as well. And I don't know if you're aware of it, but now we do CCTAs, cardiac CTs. And so
yes, I am aware.
We're dealing with some people in their late 30s, early 40s that are getting stents because they have major occlusions in their vessels and their heart. And they're starting to reach out and trying to figure out, I got to be out by 50. And some of these guys and women are people that were going to do it till they were 65. And they're like, I got to be out by 50.
We're all
earlier.
I will say this: we're all going to do it till we're 65 when we start.
Yeah.
When we get an academy, we're all there. Just ask us, right?
Yeah.
But we're not. I shared the stat about my academy class. I thought I would be there forever. I thought you'd have to force me out, right, at 65 years old. And life that wasn't the path for me, and that's okay. The job has an expiration date.
Yep.
And you're one bad call away, whether it's physically or mentally, from your expiration date. And unfortunately, we don't know when that expiration date is. But I'll tell you, the more things you can do when you're younger to fill into some of these funds. Now, let's be honest. So there's probably some people out there saying, so if you're telling me if I start when I'm 25 and I put in my RHS, my HSA, my 457, my 401, or my defined benefit, I can retire at 55 and never work again. And I'll say, no, I'm not telling you that. Well, but what I'm telling you is there may be a point in your life where you're faced with a decision of, do you want to stay at the department and you're not excited about going to work anymore, or you can't go to work anymore? And if you have enough of a cushion because you've been taking care of yourself, it buys you time to figure out what phase 2 of life looks like. Because let's face it, most people in society aren't retiring at 55. I think for firefighters, it's healthy to get out earlier because the mental toll and the physical toll it takes.
Yeah.
But we all know we're doers. I met with a client a couple of weeks ago who's retired, and he's like, I'm kind of bored. And he's going to go find a part-time job to do, not because he necessarily needs the funds, but because he needs human interaction. But the more you can do when you're young buys you a little bit of time to find what that next step looks like. You don't have to panic
Yeah.
when something happens to you.
Yeah, I agree.
Or when an opportunity comes up and you're not sure, do I want to take it or not? Well, it sure is nice when you were in your younger years and you put money away. So is it okay if we take a few seconds to talk about some of these funds and the purposes behind them?
Yeah,
Do we have
quickly,
time?
Good time.
So I think the single best thing you can do besides maxing out your 401k, and we've already talked about life insurance and an estate plan, is to contribute as much as you can to your 457. And here's why. Here's the difference. So 401k, I put it in tax deferred. I can't get it out until I'm 59 and a half without paying a penalty. And I know there's some legislation going on where they may alter that to 55, but in today's tax law, it's 59 and a half for a 401k. The other downside, if you will, again, it's like saying the ice cream's too sweet, but the other downside to a 401k is in the Secure Act, they passed a rule that you have to take a required minimum distribution. So right now that's set at 73, although it's gone back and forth with some latest bills. But let's just say at 73 years old, the government says, you know what, that's been tax deferred your whole life. We want our tax money. So you're at 73, you have to take a percentage of your fund out, regardless if you need it or not. And if you don't take it out, it's a 25% penalty. So I have retirees today who are in their 70s who have so much money in their 401k, they don't actually need to take the amount of the RMD, but they have to because the government's mandated it. And their tax bills are ridiculous. So we're working with them on what we call some Roth conversions. Again, that could be series 3 if we wanted to. But my point is that the 401k is a great tool, but you have to look at other avenues. So the 457. The 457, you put money in it, tax deferred. The 457 doesn't have an age limit. So the 457 is only for government entities or nonprofits. So some churches offer them, some public hospitals offer them, fire departments, police departments. The 457 rule is when you retire from your employer, you can access those funds. So Paul, to your point, I'm 52 years old and I have a back injury that's off duty, so I'm not covered by disability insurance. If I've done a good job in my 457, I can access those dollars day one to fund my lifestyle until I can get to whatever the next bridge is, which is awesome because what you don't want to do is not contribute to that and then have to, if my only other source is my 401, I'm gonna have to pay a 10% penalty right off the top and then taxes on top of it. Now,
If I roll that over to a different employer or a different 401 IRA or something,
it locks it.
It locks it.
Yeah. So I'll do with clients leaving the fire department, they're below 59 and a half. They have a 401k and they have a 457. And I'll tell them to leave their 457 where they're at. So we're fiduciaries. We have, as a Series 65 licensed retired registered investment advisor, we have to do what's in the best interest of our client. And we would do that anyways. But if I roll the client's funds into a 401 or into an IRA, I've locked it till they're 59 and a half. So we encourage our retirees that are bringing funds over to leave their 457 where they're at, because you cannot roll it to a 457 unless you employ with a government
Thanks for
agency.
telling me now, John.
Should have called me earlier. So we leave it there. And we have some clients that say, I don't need the full amount in there. I'll roll a little bit over. I'll put X amount into my IRA. But once you move it to an IRA, you can't access it till you're 59 and a half. Now, there are some different mechanisms you can get with an accountant if you have hardships, and you can do tax every year. You can do a certain amount. But at the end of the day, just easy to remember that 457, you can pull the money out when you retire, when you decide to retire, regardless of age. 401k, currently in law, 59 and a half before you can access it without a penalty.
Thank God I didn't need my 457, because that's exactly what I did. Was I rolled it out because guess what? A couple firefighters told me I should.
Yeah.
A couple retirees said, get it into a different IRA.
But I think that's the important thing, is that if I'm 25 years old today and I have a little bit extra money, I want to start hitting that 457. And they're capped out of what you can put in. You have a catch-up provision past a certain age where you can put more in. Some departments will match your contributions to that or not. So 457, important. Roth IRA, another one that's important. Roth IRA, I think the limit today is $7,000. Don't quote me. It changes every year, but roughly $7,000 of your income post-tax can go into Roth IRA. Roth IRA doesn't have any required minimum distributions. So I could amass that fund as big as I want, and there's no required minimum distributions. And then when I pull it out, I'm only paying on the gains of my investments, not on the underlying basis, because I've already paid taxes on it. Important for your estate as well, because if you pass your estate a 401k, your estate's going to pay a lot of dollars in taxes.
Yeah.
If I pass my estate a Roth, where you can do conversions later in life, there's less taxes.
That's a great series too.
Oh, that's a whole other like 2-part nuanced topic. Because I love Ross, and I love the conversion optionality, but it's
nuanced for sure.
But it can save you like literally millions of dollars in your 70s or your estate.
And we model this out for our clients all day long, especially firefighters, because most of them have very large 401ks and they don't understand RMDs are coming. Especially the longer you wait in life to retire, those RMDs are coming and the taxes are going to be ginormous.
Yeah, they are.
Two other quick funds I want to talk about. HSA accounts, a health savings account, is typically, it is tied to a high deductible health plan. It's one of the only accounts that's triple tax free. So money I put in, tax deferred, all the growth is tax free. And when I spend it on the backside, as long as I'm spending it for medical expenses, tax free. The great thing,
Can I ask you a question on that?
Yeah.
So YouTube University taught me this shared this with me a couple of years ago, because I'm a big HSA fan. I max out the $7,000 or $8,000 every year. You know, it goes up a few $100 a year. That basically like, hey, in 10 years, if I take out money, I can say expenses from year 2024 can offset that, so I can truly take out money and never pay taxes on there. Is that your understanding of it?
It is my understanding.
Because there's no timing on when you spend the medical bills, right?
So, great question. So 2 different funds. Flex account is something that you may hear at your department where you can pull money out every month tax-free to pay medical expenses. I have to use it for expenses incurred in that year. And at the end of the year, I lose whatever I don't spend
it's
in it.
It's a use or lose it, right?
It's a use it or lose it on the flex spending account. And you can only have a flex spending account if you're in a health insurance plan that has like co-pays, that type of thing. So you cannot be in a flex spending. Well, I'm sorry. You can be a limited flex spending account if you're in a high deductible health plan. But it's use it or lose it. And it has to be expenses incurred in that year. HSA account doesn't. The other great thing about the HSA account is you're the banker. So the money's you control the money. You control the investments. You can invest it. Most providers, you can invest it in any vehicle you want. Single equities, ETFs, mutual funds, your choice. Again, your gains, you don't pay any income tax on. And when you pull it out for those expenses, you don't. So what I always would tell people in the department is save your explanation of benefits. What we know is that healthcare is expensive, but if I go for my regular checkup and it's $25 in a high deductible health plan, we would just, in our household, would just pay that on our credit card. Yep. And I wouldn't touch my HSA money.
Yeah.
Because I want that HSA money to grow as fast as possible, tax-free, because it's the only opportunity in life to do that.
Compounded.
Yep. So now later in life, 10 years to your point, I want to buy something or I need some money. And I have all these receipts for the last 10 years that I can prove I paid with my Visa or my MasterCard or my Amex. I can pull the money out of my HSA account. I don't have to send those receipts into anybody. The only time I have to prove that I use those for medical expenses if I were to get audited by the IRS. And then I would share with the auditor, here's all my expenses. I didn't pay for them. I'm pulling my HSA money out now to pay for that.
And you do that with your explanation of benefits. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Or if you want to save a receipt as well. And the great news is most of those now are saved on the internet forever. Unlike a flex plan where I have to send my receipt into a third-party provider and they either approve or deny the charge, the health savings account plan is different. I'm the banker. I decide if I want to pull the money out. And if I get audited, I show them the receipt of this is what it was brought up.
So then I can go buy my boat with that HSA money.
We're not
right?
advocating buying a boat with HSA
Here we go.
money.
Bite your tongue, Paul.
But a great again, I think you're correct. It depends if you're a single HDHP or a family. I think it's $3,750 or $7,600 a year. Again, the numbers change. You'll need to check with your accountant on what those numbers could be or your department. But you can put that in every single year. And again, we're talking pre-tax. So by the time I get that in my paycheck, it's not as much as when it comes out before and goes right in this account and is invested right away. You can also use it then after you've retired. So let's say I have an HSA when I leave my department and I'm 55 years old and I'm panicked about health insurance. So you'll use your HSA funds to pay for health insurance premiums to bridge you until you get to Medicare, Medicaid. So another tool for you today to make those small contributions into that account. And then one of the biggest fears we have is health insurance. I talk to a lot of retirees that say, I can't retire today because I'm not Medicare eligible.
Firefighters hold on forever for that.
Yeah. So build up your HSA today to where you can pay for that. And then the other fund I want to talk about is a retirement health savings fund. Most departments should have it. I know the department we came from had it. It was a generous benefit. Again, that's funds you can use in retirement. Similar to a 457, there's no age. So when I left the department at 47 years old, I'm accessing my RHS dollars the next day if I want to. Another avenue to pay premiums.
Yep.
Goes in tax deferred. Earnings are tax deferred on it till I use it. And if I use it for medical care, I don't pay taxes on that.
Yeah.
So
vehicles.
A lot of different things when you think about, my HSA, let's say it's 4,000 I can put away. My RHS is limited by the IRS, and my 457, I'm not sure what the exact number on that is. Roth's about 7,000. So we're talking, it might be $20,000 a year in extra ability to put away in these accounts that over a 20 or 30 year career with compounding interest can really set you up for success.
Well, also, especially those with tax efficiency as another leg to the stool on there is just, it took me years to understand the tax efficiency standpoint. It can be epic.
Yeah. I mean, we're going to pay taxes. We understand that. And our job as advisors is to walk that path with you on how do we maximize the amount we're saving to lower our tax bill. We're not ever trying to evade taxes, obviously,
right,
but we're trying to maximize the vehicles that we have today so that our tax bill is lower. You're going to pay it one way or another. You might as well be putting the money in your pocket on some pre-tax contributions to your HSA or RHS, those types of things.
It's how the wealthy gets wealthy.
Your 529s.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, this has been great. It's always great to have a financial advisor here where we don't have to defer and say, I'm not a financial advisor, go talk to somebody, but we got you right here to give us the down and dirty, which has been awesome.
Yeah.
And one that brings a bottle of Blanton's too. While we talk about it, it's even just
that's one
a
of
big cherry on top.
Yeah. I'm starting to slur my words a little bit here. So.
I think it's important that for anyone listening to this, again, and I apologize, the numbers change on these accounts on what you can put away. And it can be a little frustrating as an advisor because they're hard to keep in your head. And as bills change, the numbers change. So anytime you have a question on how much can I put into that account again, you can always reach out to us. We can help you. Your HR department should be able to help you. If you want to really be bored and go to the IRS website, that'll help you. But just understand those numbers change. The premise I'm getting at is try to max out those as much as you can so that our take home pay is a lot lower. Our taxes are a lot lower. And again, it's all choices. I shared my story about the Dodge Ram, and had someone told me that Dodge Ram was going to cost me $100,000, I never would have bought it. It did. And I didn't realize it cost me that until 20 years later.
Yeah.
So I share my stories, my mistakes, because what we don't want is the generation of firefighters coming in today to not be set up to be able to retire and still have life. I know a couple of guys who retired, and their retirement, for one of them, his retirement was a week. Another one before he passed away. Another one's retirement was less than a year before he passed away. And another one retired with 4 months before he passed away.
Too all common of a story.
Yeah.
Hear it all the time.
And that was just our department and close friends of mine. And so I share that because we think in our kind of the complex we have when we go in the fire department that we're going to work till we're 60 and then we're going to live till we're 90. And it's going to be an amazing life. And that may be true. But what I'll tell you is the odds aren't bearing out that way. And probably we should probably leave a little bit sooner than we do. We probably shouldn't hang on so long. We probably should enjoy life a little bit more than we do. And all those are attainable if we just make some smart decisions early on in our career and commit to them.
Yeah. Great advice.
Yeah. Well, cheers, Jon. Thanks so much
cheers.
for
Cheers. This was great.
Great advice.
Yeah.
And I look forward to having you back on for part 2 and we can teach some classes as well in the future as well.
It'd be
Jon,
great. Paul,
Jamin, great time and great topic.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks, Jon. Thanks,
Thank you.
Chris.